It should be going live. My internet stopped last night. And I was like up riding until 2. And right before I was done with my tight end preview, the internet went out. And I was like, oh, God. So good thing I had to shovel snow this morning. All right. Well, the scouting combine is coming up this week in Indianapolis. I am on my way for a decade plus of going to Indy to look at the scouting combine. Sigmund Bloom, Cecil Lammey here on the Audible, kind of going over some new drills, Bloom, and just the importance of the combine, because I rail on this on my local show on 104.3 The Fan. And thank you all for making me the #1 sports show at night in Denver. It's awesome. Ratings are huge, so thank you guys. But I will say this. I rail on it all the time. The combine isn't everything, but it's not nothing either. So when you hear people go on and on about it's the underwear Olympics,
right,
that's a very ignorant take. There's a lot there more than just the drills. We're going to get into the new drills, Bloom.
Sure.
But we're also going to talk just about the importance of this part of the pre-draft process.
Yeah. Where do I even start? You're going to make me recite some sort of 5-minute manifesto here, right? Because this is important. First and foremost, and what I look forward to talking to you about both on the air and off the air about is the coaches, decision makers addressing the media. Bob Harris, our fantasy football's crazy uncle. We love him. You know, if they tell the truth, they don't often tell the truth, he says, but if they tell the truth, it's most likely to be at the combine when we start to think about teams' directions, what they're going to do with their offenses or their players they like, what they think about players on their team and things like that. So that's important. It has nothing to do with what actually happens there. But it kind of does because they make a schedule. So it's run by the NFL. We're also going to have the medicals. We're going to have the interviews. This is also, by the way, when teams are talking trade. Teams are talking also about what their plans are. So a lot of that quarterback domino stuff. Again, we're not even talking about the drills on the field yet. This is a big deal. Okay. Then we get to these drills. And what's cool about it, Steve, is at least it is changing. Because what it asks is, how do you evaluate a football player in this atomic vacuum? And as we watched the games and the practices together on the All-Star trip, I think what it is seeing the same player doing the same thing. And I'm not necessarily talking about the time drills and measurables. We can get into all that and analytics. Right. But just watching the players in the drills doing the same thing over and over again, it shows you the differences. And the differences, I think, aren't as important. And see, my thinking about the draft is continuing to change, where I almost don't want to create a ranked list from 1 to 27. I want to be able to paint a picture and say a team that values these parts of a player's game will like this player, and a team that values this other part probably won't. And that's how the players separate themselves. So we talk about this wide receiver class. Our man Daniel Jeremiah, Audible alum.
Guy. Right. 2 years on this show. Very first media exposure, because Sigmund saw him on Twitter and was like, we got to get this guy on.
This guy's awesome. And he is awesome.
He's great. And one of the greatest men out there as well. Great man, in addition to great draft analyst.
So he says 27 receivers he has graded between rounds 1 and 3. Okay. And I think that Mel Kiper had something similar. People say, well, there's just no way that 1/4 of the top 100 picks are going to be wide receivers. And it's probably true. But this combine is going to be important for teams to pick their specific targets. So the combine drills aren't so much about sequentially ranking players as it is about understanding fit, understanding the hot and cool zones in their game, and then teams being smart enough to see alignment between that and what they do. So it's really fun. And of course, it's big for small school players to show that they fit in, just like the All-Star games. It's big for specific players answering specific questions. You know, for each player, we can say this is the most important part of the combine for them. So just 3 minutes, I think, not 5 minutes. But yeah, it's exciting. This is a big, big moment in the football calendar.
This is a huge moment in the football calendar, and it's something you noted before we get into like the drills and some of the players we're excited to see. Bloom, it's the news cycle, and it's the information. This is the last bastion of good information that we will get. I regularly call April the month of lies, because that's what it is. And if I don't hear it at the Senior Bowl or at the Combine, I don't believe it if all of a sudden in April some sort of news comes out. seasonal lies might begin a little bit early with Detroit. We really, really like Tua. Okay. You're trying to make Miami move. Miami themselves lying. We can like somebody else. They love Tua. But the point is, you're going to get great information. And all of these teams are talking. All of the agents are there. Business gets done. There's no tampering. Tampering is illegal at Bushwood, sir.
Right.
And I never slice. Like, yeah, everybody talks, whether it's talking trade, talking free agents, talking your own free agents, trying to set something up. Business gets done. And when you go out at night, because everyone works really hard during the day, and then everyone goes to Prime 47 or the Marriott Hotel bar. Shula's isn't around anymore, by the way, Bloom. I walked over there last year and I was like, oh, it's closed. Nobody told me. But anyway, so like they go out and about. You'll go to Prime 47 and there'll be Jerry Jones Cowboys bus parked out front. John Elway's sitting at a table with Howie Roseman. Like, business is getting done. Now it's getting done over some cold pops and some frosty beverages, but that's how the NFL does it. So this is very important just for the news cycle. And that's what I'm most excited about, Bloom. And we'll get into the players and the drills and all that. But for me, it's just, what are we going to learn? Is Darius Slay going to get traded next week?
Right.
Like something like that. It's very, very possible.
Well, it's like the league comes out of its short slumber. I mean, Greg Olson signed. There's been some teams making some personnel moves. Did you see the Panthers letter they sent to the PSL? And it's going to be a long process, long hard slog, but we're going to get better. Which tells me, oh, what kind of changes are coming there? But the point of this is, Super Bowl or end of season to the combine, things are in a bit of a slowdown stasis, and then it all gets stirred back up again. And what's great, and again, Andy Hicks is writing an article, Football Guys, about the quarterback carousel or quarterback landing spots. And this is a really unique offseason for a lot of reasons. We haven't even mentioned the CBA. A really unique offseason, but the quarterbacks highlight it. And then those are dominoes that cause other quarterback dominoes and team dominoes, different, just like you mentioned, the Lions. Are the Lions really in a quasi rebuilding mode right now? It's possible based on what we're hearing. It's credible possibilities coming out of the team. So you're right, Cecil. A lot of those things that right now we're just, everything has a question mark at the end of it, right? Question mark. Some of those question marks are going to get narrowed down to statements that we can start to project and piece together how these teams are going to look, because we see it. I think we see it through the head coach and offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator turnover. These teams are reinventing themselves like Arizona more and more, and are clues to how wide the possibilities are going to come this week.
I love the fact that more teams are open-minded about that.
Yeah.
Not everybody, certainly, but the NFL, it's like, turning a cruise ship or whatever, like take some time. So as we get to, just for me, Bloom, it's medicals. Medicals is the biggest thing. Medicals and interviews. That's what this is all about. And we can discuss that and players, that will need to have good medicals, etc. But when I get to the drills, and I just start with quarterbacks, right? And this is kind of a primer, if you will. I'll be in Indy on Sunday. So Monday, make sure you're like and subscribe, and make sure if you're a longtime subscriber that you're still subscribed, because YouTube will unsubscribe you. Ring the notification bell so you get notifications when we go live. We'll be doing another show on Monday, in addition to Sig Section, some of our smaller videos as well. Thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel. But for me, it's about, how does Joe Burrow look throwing the ball? Do we have confirmation that he is throwing? Because he said no to the Senior Bowl, which is fine. He should have, because he would have been on a field with Justin Herbert, and everyone would have been, parsing everything that these guys did against each other or on the same team or whatever. And Burrow, with incredible pass placement, incredible accuracy, very bright individual, should be the number 1 overall pick, but the arm strength. So when you talk about passing drills and miles per hour, they're going to have the radar gun out. It'll be interesting to see how Joe Burrow responds and how tightly he spins the ball.
Yeah, and I think this isn't a great spot for him. Okay, the combine is not going to highlight the things that make Joe Burrow a great quarterback. Maybe some of his accuracy, but it's really what he's doing outside of structure, and arm strength. See, you hear it. He doesn't have an arm, right? It's like, that's the thing. If you're going to have any hesitation about Joe Burrow at all, if you watch the way his game integrates, I still don't think it should cause hesitation. So arm strength and just how hot the ball comes out of your hand is highlighted more in the combine. But, hopefully in those drills, timing and accuracy are too. But the other quarterbacks, I think it becomes a lot more interesting. Like Jordan Love, how a team that's ready to fall in love with Jordan Love this could be the week they do it, or this could be the week that gives them some hesitation. Justin Herbert the combine is great for him because he's a traits guy. The parts are better than the whole. Of course, Tua, we have the medicals, and Jacob Eason is another one. You're hearing this. What one team has him as high as second on their board? It's the arm. And it depends on how important arm strength is in your profile, and that is going to show off. So I think these quarterbacks are going to really distinguish themselves for people that are new to this draft class, and you understand what their defining traits are. Unfortunately for Burrow, it's not one that the combine really highlights.
Right. And, we'll see Jordan Love, who did a fantastic job at the Senior Bowl, just being super aggressive. So a lot of teams are excited. Potentially a top 10 pick. I know the Colts and Raiders are interested as well at 12 and 13 respectively. So, and in kind of the Joe Burrow line, and you mentioned Eason, well, I'll mention the guy that he transferred away from, and Jake Fromm. Like, this isn't a good spot for Jake Fromm either.
No, I mean, Fromm is one of those guys that you want him in a chalkboard session. You want him talking scheme. He's an extension of the coach and scheme kind of quarterback, but not traits that are going to really stand out in this setting. But he's going to appeal to certain teams. I think Love is going to be the most fun to watch for the reasons that you say. And I think you're going to hear some sort of buzz about him. And I think another question with Love that it's just, and I know you love this kind of soft stuff too. Just how does he handle himself?
Right.
Because quarterback is the one position we're going to talk about this with. Between the interviews and between the media attention and between how you handle the emotional or psychological pressure of the combine, all eyes on you. How do you handle it? How do you rise to that? With coming from Utah State, and his story is really interesting too, about his father, losing his father, and how much his father was so invested when he lost him at a young age. How does that translate at this moment along that path for him? Because we talk about franchise quarterbacks. So see, somebody that we're not going to question about this at all is Tua, right? I mean, Tua is a dude that just carries himself. He's carried himself like a franchise quarterback pretty much from day one. To Jordan Love and what you can observe in between, not necessarily the results of the drills or the measurables, but how does a player handle themselves knowing how many eyes are on them and how much pressure there is on them to perform at this crucial moment in their development?
Yeah, and Tua just comes down to medicals.
Yep.
And then number 2 should be the place people target. Don't you think, Bloom? I mean, we're doing a combine preview, but there's also some NFL news and notes. Like, I don't believe the Lions,
right?
And I don't believe the Dolphins. The Dolphins want Tua. I think the Chargers might want Tua more. So if you're the Dolphins, you really want to nip this in the bud, just trade up to 2.
I think so. If you want to ensure that, this is good. This is more just like draft preview, but draft preview, combine preview, same thing, right? See, I think that if we look at Tua, and again, medicals aside, all medicals are in a positive direction right now. He's the kind of quarterback that, okay, we remember how compelled the Rams were to get Robert Griffin III, who also went second, 3 firsts and a second, right? I mean, if we soberly look at Tua and how rare it is to get a quarterback who's this precocious as a passer and this precocious as somebody who playing in the eye of a storm. I mean, he creates an eye of a storm around him with his abilities. You should feel compelled to mortgage the future. So absolutely, Washington has a really interesting decision. Bruce Allen's out. So this is a really huge offseason for them because Chase Young, you'll hear a lot about Chase Young on the defensive side. He is that transcendent edge rush prospect. But at the same time, if you can get 3 first-round picks from Miami or another team, why not Indianapolis, right? So this is where Chris Ballard, the wheel should be turning in Chris Ballard's head. Because if you're Indianapolis, giving up 3 first-round picks isn't as risky as if you're Miami because you have an established team. You're going to be picking in the top 6, top 8 every year like Miami might be, or a sleeper team. I mean, just because you're only going to get one shot in the next 10 to 20 years to get a prospect like Tua. We remember how amazing it was when he came on the scene. Is there anybody whose origin story, coming on in relief in the college national championship as a freshman,
right,
and winning it? I mean, It's kind of Cardell Jones-esque, but unlike Cardell Jones,
but he's actually
he kept
good.
showing us, right. He kind of kept showing us that this is who he is and what is he going to be. He seems like a player of destiny, really. So I understand being compelled, but Washington might also be compelled by Chase Young. Either way, Detroit's number 3 pick got a lot more valuable if they play the situation well. Lions fans are probably thinking they're just going to take Jeffrey Okudah and let the quarterback or the trade up possibilities fall. So this is the intrigue, and all of these things intersect at the combine.
Yeah, the intrigue at the running back position. I thought I saw something from you on Twitter about DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
Because when I go through the 3 potential first-round running backs, and Jonathan Taylor, of course, J.K. Dobbins, and DeAndre Swift, you're almost splitting hairs between the trio in terms of what you appreciate, what you like. Swift has some, not necessarily Devin Singletary bloom. That's an inaccurate comparison. I've seen people compare him to Frank Gore. I don't agree with that either. But from a physical standpoint, from a testing standpoint, DeAndre Swift's not going to be the fastest guy out there.
No.
He's not going to be the most powerful guy out there. He's very natural, though. He's very instinctive. Yeah. And we saw with Singletary the great success from a guy that wasn't a physical freak, but still was able to have great success for the Bills as a rookie.
Yeah. So I've just started really delving into the running backs and watched the top 4 with, some where I'm ready to really kind of close the book on my basic take on these guys. And I'll say this, none of them are worth first-round picks, especially in this year's class, especially with running back being devalued, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that Swift, there's not really much that he's going to be able to prove or disprove at the combine. He is what he is, Swift certainly is a running back who's going to be very productive in the NFL. Matt Waldman recently posted something where you see, he has some ability to adjust on the fly as a receiver, but not necessarily someone who's going to win in routes the way you would look for. He can, add some value. He's a kind of a clunky change of direction guy, but he runs with a good second gear. He's good with his contact around his low contact and things like that. But my point is, like you said, he's not going to show out in the passing drills. He's not going to be a liability. More on that in a second. He's also not going to be the top among any of the measurables. Now, Jonathan Taylor might. I mean, look, Jonathan Taylor's the best sort of pure runner if you're drafting a running back strictly for that. But for him, pass blocking, he did more as a receiver. So, there's a bigger debate looming here, which is how big of a part of a running back's draft profile is their passing down skills? I almost said 60%. I meant to say 40%. The point is it's closer to 50-50. Right?
And it's Jonathan getting Taylor, larger by the moment.
Exactly. So Jonathan Taylor could be like A++ as a runner, but if he's a D in the passing game, how does that balance out?
People will say Derrick Henry. And then you'll say, yeah, he's not Derrick Henry.
He's not Derrick Henry. There's only one Derrick Henry. Yeah, I mean, so you've got that. J.K. Dobbins, some similar stuff, right? Jalen Jeremiah brings up that, last time we saw him, he was dropping passes in the playoff. Ronald Jones maybe looms as a cautionary tale here in that he's had some slow ramp up in his application in the passing game. But again, with J.K. Dobbins, who should show out athletically probably better than Taylor or Swift. So if you're strictly looking at measurables, he may be closer to like a Jonathan Stewart kind of profile physically. But again, if he can't contribute in the passing game, Stewart was a good receiver. Dobbins, if he can't contribute as much in the passing game, with Taylor, I think it's more pass blocking, but still not a nifty route runner. So where does this all lead to, Cease? And again, don't look at the measurables necessarily, but what you look at is a player showing off their skill set. And Clyde Helaire-Edwards is the guy who might only be a B, but not a low, I mean, I've heard the name Ray Rice. I'm not saying he's Ray Rice. Okay. But just think of that type of runner. He's not a liability as a runner in any way. In a spread running game, he may actually be just the equal of these guys. But as a receiver, what he can do in the passing game is also a big asset. And I think when we watch him in those receiving drills, he's going to be not just head of the class, but in a different class.
The one guy that I can't stop talking about on the local airwaves, even on Broncos TV, is Antonio Gibson. But if you look over the running backs that are participating in the combine, you won't see Antonio Gibson because he's working out as a wide receiver. Right. Now, this feels like Jalen Samuels, dude. And we talk about the NFL changing, the NFL growing, the NFL understanding new concepts and all that. I still don't think they understand positionless football yet as much as they should. At least the Steelers didn't with Jalen Samuels. Such a bitter taste in my mouth from Jalen Samuels. But Gibson seems to be that guy. And we're talking about receiving backs. Gibson is a back. He's a slot receiver. Imagine if Theo Riddick was 220 pounds. You know, that and a good runner, because Riddick was never a great runner. He's a slot receiver, basically. But Gibson's going to be, I'm still considering him a running back. And he's my guy to look at and be like, hey, 4th round, whatever. I want to see how he catches. I want to see how he does in these drills, even though there'll be a WR on his jersey.
Right now, my brain is just asking myself, did I say Clyde Hilaire Edwards or Clyde Edwards Hilaire? But I have to turn the page here. You mentioned what's funny is history repeats itself, right? There was a good discussion. I can't remember the tackle that it just came out that maybe he might go in the top 15, and the comparison was Eric Flowers, who also went too high. And we see
it wasn't Josh Jones, was it? Because Jones is getting a lot of hype after his Senior Bowl performance, and it's like, listen, Josh Jones, he's like Ricky Bobby. He doesn't know what to do with his hands. Like, he's a great prospect in the 2nd round. He's big and tough and physical and mean, but if it wasn't Josh Jones, that's the guy that's getting all the hype now, Bloom.
No, Austin Jackson, actually.
Oh, the USC kid. He's super athletic, but he's he bends a lot in the wrong way. He tries to lunge at pass rushers. Anyway.
So with Gibson, of course, it's Memphis, right?
Because Patrick Taylor's there as well. He's the runner, and Gibson was their receiver back.
Right, and then, of course, you have Tony Pollard and Darrell Henderson. And I had to look into this, too. Mike Silver apparently said something about Darrell Henderson being hurt, even though he wasn't on the injury report last year. So that could explain a little bit of what happened there. Memphis running backs. But like you said, Memphis weapons. And I think absolutely Antonio Gibson. But look, the NFL didn't sleep on this with Pollard. Because he's at this time in the process last year, where did most people have Pollard? Did they even have him in the draft?
Maybe late round.
Maybe 7th round, right?
Yeah.
And he goes in the 4th round of the Cowboys. So at least one organization saw the potential, and I think another one will. I think 4th round sounds right for Gibson. And the fact that he's classified either as a wide receiver or running back just shows you that. By the way, since being thematic here, sees quarterbacks, new drills, end zone fade routes. Yeah, I mean, I think the fade is actually one of the worst play calls with, you have like Plaxico Burress on your team or something. And then the timed smoke route drill. So that's going to be interesting. For running backs, the Deuce Staley drill. They're going to line up behind a step over bag that's part of 3 bags laid to form a cross, and they have to step over the bag in front, then laterally, then backward. And they'll hold a pop-up dummy to create a hole for the running back to then explode and identify and explode. The Deuce Staley drill, and then inside routes with change of direction, the Texas routes. So they took out the pitch and cone and the find the ball drill. But you see the evolution and see it's sprinkled into a lot of these discussions about how the combine helps teams find what they're looking for. And I think in a player like Gibson in positionless football, this is something that Kyle Shanahan's on this. Jalen Hurts last year, right? Antonio Gibson is certainly going to be the biggest name in terms of draft stock in that versatility weapon category.
It is the Audible. It's Cecil, Lammey, and Sigmund Bloom. Thanks for watching on our YouTube channel, also on Facebook Live. Hi, Facebook. So thanks for checking our show out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Chat room's awesome. Need you to comment as well. Helps us out in our YouTube algorithm. And where's our buddy from up in Greeley, Pot Stoner Degenerate? Yep. Where are you at, dude? Because Bloom was wearing the Saints hat, and I was like, oh, I got one of those. I've been shoveling snow all day, so I'll put on this. There. For the listening audience, Bloom, got to readjust the headset and turn up my microphone. But I want to rewind. I was a little premature earlier because I want to rewind to Jalen Hurts, who says he's only doing quarterback drills. We've seen this before from other quarterbacks. With Taysom Hill, kind of, again, teams try and find their Taysom Hill. Go look up John Lovett, by the way. Chiefs might have their version of Taysom Hill, even though they list him at a tight end or a fullback. By the way, there's a Taysom Hill maybe coming from Chatfield Chargers that's entering the NFL. I'll get to him in a little bit when we talk tight ends and my man Dalton Keene. But all right, should Hurts do that, Bloom? Or should he be like, want me to catch some passes? I'll catch some passes, because he could be, honestly, he could be better than Taysom Hill. Matt Waldman's compared him to David Garrard. If he hits, Jalen Hurts would be that guy. That's not a bad guy. Add in some Taysom Hill. I mean, you're going to get on the field. Jalen Hurts right now, what's he going to be? 3rd round pick, right? Okay, he's not going to play for 2 years. If you go out there and catch passes, and you go out there and do the Deuce Staley drill or whatever, and throw passes, now you're on the field as a rookie. Now you're maybe having a team think, how can we get Jalen Hurts the ball more?
Yeah, it's a tough choice, Cease. This is a fun game to play in a way, like you're the agent, right? Because if I'm the agent, I don't know whose agent is right now. Turn back the clock 10 years, I probably knew who everybody's agent was. They knew who I was, and they were trying to get us to say things. But I'm agents, I love you. I think that the earning potential of quarterback, it's just so. This is why you mentioned Taysom Hill, like what his contract is going to look like, what the tender is going to be. That's going to be interesting. He probably will get a second or first round tender, $4 or $5 million. Well, then what's the next contract, though? In light of this idea that maybe Sean Payton wants him to be the next quarterback, and Bridgewater is going to end up elsewhere. But we're talking about a position where Teddy Bridgewater is going to get $25 million. I don't know. Basically, anybody who's expected to start for their team is going to get, new CBA will figure out what the numbers, they're going to get a ridiculous number. The highest per year contract this year in free agency sees at non-quarterback will probably still be below what Teddy Bridgewater gets, So why not insist on being developed as a quarterback? Not so much to make a statement about your belief in yourself, but to make sure that the team that takes you wants to develop you as a quarterback. And I think you exhaust that first. And the good news is, we've talked about this a couple of times in the offseason already, Cease. Offensive coordinators are more open. We hit this at the top of the show. Teams are more open-minded. I think offensive coordinators are more. This is what's funny about this Taysom Hill stuff, because he's Nick Underhill, Jeff Duncan. I mean, these are peerless beat writers in terms of if they say something's coming from the organization, either they're being manipulated in some sort of huge conspiracy theory, or in the building, it's what they believe. In the building, they believe Sean Payton, Mike Westhoff, former special teams coordinator, just speaking out about it. They believe Taysom Hill can be the next quarterback. And you can say, why didn't they play him last year? Or, he's only thrown this many passes. But that doesn't mean that they don't believe that, even if it's absurd. And what that tells me is that an offensive coordinator can create something around a player where the value added by making the defense play 11-on-11 football is greater than the value lost because they're not a pure passer. And then you figure out what their specific strengths are as a passer. And one of the things that I heard mentioned that's interesting, we get into real football theory. That's what I love about draft season, because we can talk a lot more football theory, you know? And that Taysom Hill, because he gives the play extra time to develop, that, the play doesn't have to happen in the first 2 to 3 seconds. You can design concepts that maybe take a little bit longer because of his ability to do that. And we see this with Kyler Murray. Maybe Jalen Hurts, you can harness this. Then that changes the terms of engagement with the defense. And again, running backs, how important is the profile as a receiver, as a pass blocker, as a runner? For quarterbacks, how important is the athleticism, the natural running ability? I say natural running ability to exclude Marcus Mariota. And how important is the passing ability? And is there enough there? Like Colin Kaepernick, man, there's enough there to work with. It's a threshold question, not how good are they as a passer, but is there enough there to work with to make one of these new style offenses where 11-on-11 football is leveraged more often? Can they make it work? Jalen Hurts wants to prove that he can make it work, and then he can be one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league in the right offense.
Interesting as always. Going through the scouting combine, this is the greatest wide receiver class in NFL history. Mel Kiper saying 25 to 30 receivers off the board in the first 3 rounds. Sounds crazy. Maybe not. Let's talk top of the draft. And really, Jerry Jeudy to me is the perfect prospect. Not Calvin Johnson. Nobody is Megatron, but Bloom, we rarely see a route runner like Jeudy coming into the league. Shades of Marvin Harrison. Definitely Amari Cooper clone, in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb there with shades of DeAndre Hopkins to his game and great adjustment ability and body control and all those things. But I really want to discuss Henry Ruggs, and we can discuss whoever you want, brother. But for me, it's Ruggs, as our man Daniel Jeremiah said. He's running a 4.2 something. I don't know what that something is, but it's a 4.2 something. Right. So people going nuts saying Tyreek Hill, our man Lance Zierlein. You want to talk about great men? I mean, give you the shirt off your back type of guy, right? Lance Zierlein is top of the top, dude. Nobody better. Just great friend, dear friend. He said, and he compared Ruggs to Ted Ginn. And going back and watching Ruggs, and not just because Lance had him compared to Ted Ginn, but just Ruggs he's not as feisty as Tyreek Hill is. Tyreek Hill's a mother blanker when it comes to
Tyreek Hill
mentality.
So, the player that we start comparing Tyreek Hill to, and I don't mean that he has this to the same extent of this player, is Steve Smith. I mean the archetype, because there is a fight to his game.
Well, Henry Ruggs is not Steve Smith,
right?
If we're going to boil it down, and Henry Ruggs might be a little more Ted Ginn, which means, do you really want Henry Ruggs at number 9 if you're Jacksonville, or number 15 if you're Denver?
Well, no. I mean, I think that, but at the same time, he presents a very discrete tactical value as a vertical receiver that lots of teams need. And that's, we're going to watch Robbie Anderson. We're going to watch Brashad Perryman. And now we have some new names. We'll see if Taylor Gabriel is out there. Paul Richardson is going to be out there. The point is, adding that speed, it creates, think of the whiteboard where you're trying to create plays. It makes it larger. It makes the area and this is why quarterback play is important too. It makes the area that the defense has to defend larger, and it creates more breathing room for different things to open up. So a team that is specifically looking for that, CeeDee Lamb doesn't provide that. Jerry Jeudy doesn't provide that. That's what Henry Ruggs provides. And then, of course, the other thing here too is people are making models and trying to use these filters, analytics, right, to catch players that cause red flags or see how deep the green is on the green flag. And of course, with Ruggs, there's this production idea. And it just brings us to ask the question, what's the context? Everything should be taken in context. But his speed will stand out in any context. And it just depends how much teams value that speed. But we're going to see it is go back to the larger picture here, 27, first to third round. I don't think a quarter of the first 100 picks are going to be wide receivers. I do think that in the draft mindset, there's going to be a run in the second round and there's going to be a run in the fourth round. Everybody in the first round look, there are teams that should be looking for alphas, like Oakland, maybe Arizona. These teams should be looking for an alpha receiver. And you're not going to necessarily get an alpha in the second. Maybe in this class, you might find somebody who has like alpha ceiling. But chances are, if you want an alpha, you got to take him in the first. Otherwise, you're breaking the tie in favor of wide receiver because you're looking at the quality in the second round, third round, fourth round. You're going to continue to break the tie in favor of wide receiver. But I think there are going to be receivers that teams have rated as first rounders that they decide to pull the trigger on in the second. And then they're going to be receivers they have rated as second rounders that fourth round, when everyone resorts and there's all those trades up to the top of the board, you had a night to sleep on it, 2 nights to sleep on it. That's what these things correspond to, is maybe in the ebb and flow of the first and second day, teams are going to say, maybe not a receiver right now, but when they sleep on it and they look at the names still left on the board, they're going to be excited to get them on the second day in the second round and on the third day in the fourth round.
When I was sitting in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium, beautiful stadium, by the way. Yeah. I got a text from our man, Chad Ryder from NFL Network. You want to talk about top of the top. There's some really good people in this industry. Yeah. Now there's some pieces of junk too, but if we're talking about it, we're praising the likes of Dane Brugler. I mean, is anybody better than Dane Brugler? Like, seriously, like there's some really, really good people in this community and the draft community. So Chad texts me and he goes, hey, every year, like there's, a couple, 3 teams that take 2 receivers in the first 3 rounds. Would the Broncos do that? And I thought about it. I was like, well, they got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. I was like, yeah, they could take Henry Ruggs at 15 and they could take KJ Hill at 95. to wrap it up. So, and kind of using that logic, Bloom, 2 or 3 teams take a couple of receivers in the first 3 rounds. Instead of 2 or 3 teams, it might be 3 or 4 teams.
Yeah.
5 or 6 teams, or 6 or 7 teams. Like, it might be some people double dipping here because of the quality and breadth of talent.
Yeah, it's not outlandish at all, honestly. And you can even take 2 players, understanding how you project them to fit into, again, your route concepts and how they can play off of each other. So I think that's the challenge for these teams. Again, not to rank these receivers 1 to 27, but to understand for these parts of our playbook and this role, this receiver is somebody who's going to translate well. So, and I think, there's a lot of teams that we shouldn't rule out being in the market. Okay, like Kansas City and San Francisco. Wouldn't surprise me if they both take wide receivers in the first round. I mean, Kyle Shanahan is probably looking for that alpha, somebody, depending on what they do with Emmanuel Sanders. Kansas City, I think Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson are likely to be gone this offseason. And they have Hardman and they have Hill and they have Kelsey, but there's another element they can add there. So this is that class. And it's going to, for fantasy football, it's going to shake things up. We had 6, 7, 8 fantasy relevant rookies this year. And if we were to rank last year's rookies, now, of course, you might say, well, we know more about last year's rookies and how they translate, so we have to upgrade them. But if we're talking about snapshot at the time of the draft, right, and we're doing the top 50 receivers from the combined 19 and 20 classes, like 15 of them are from the 2019 class, maybe. Yep. I mean, so that's exciting. If those many receivers, that many hit early in their career arc from last year's class, what's this year's class going to be like?
Yeah, what is this year's class going to be like? And what is Laviska Shenault going to do? Of course,
that's the name.
Right down the road in Boulder, Colorado, saw him. I used to call him a smaller Julio Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Then I said there was some Christian McCaffrey to his game. I mean, and trust me, this guy, Wildcat quarterback, run after the catch, doesn't run the full route tree, and is hurt a lot. So medicals are going to be huge. Has a groin thing. No surgery needed per Adam Schefter. We got that a week ago. He's probably going to work out. It's not official yet. And of course, we're recording this the Friday before the combine starts. But with Viska, there's an alpha that could slide to 2. Or maybe, I don't want to say 3, but remember, Keenan Allen had the PCL injury.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen was a first-round talent. We all knew it. He fell to the 3rd because of the PCL injury. So Viska Shenault, if you want that guy, because I love guys like Denzel Mims, right, in 2nd round. We could talk about Brandon Ayuk if you wanted in the 2nd round. Like a ton of receivers to talk about. But for me, it's Viska. Is Viska going to be a first rounder or not? The combine's going to help determine that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one, Cease, where you're the agent, right? Because I think that we can often look back at combine numbers disappointed, and there can be a reason. And absolutely, it's the damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because if he runs and does everything at the combine and the groin affects him, and how's the groin not going to affect him?
Right.
I mean, how are you getting a picture? So, again, you can do glass half full and say, well, how are you getting a picture of what the healthy Shenault's going to be? But then you can also do glass half empty and say, well, isn't the fact that he's not healthy a warning to you that you're not getting to see the healthy? How often are you going to get to see the healthy player at the pro level? And you think about Sammy Watkins again, not that that was a red flag for that going into the combine, but there's the medicals. But then you said, you said it kind of in a secondary way, not a primary way, but he doesn't run the full route tree, or we don't know if he can run the full route tree. Right. So while the measurables might get hurt by the groin, going out there and trying to stand out in this class and showing, in a Michael Thomas kind of way. Michael Thomas is a good example of somebody where you didn't see a lot of stuff on tape. Ohio State, Paris Campbell last year too. You didn't see a lot of stuff on tape. So the combine's really big to show that they can handle these kinds of routes that they weren't asked to do a lot in college. It's not seeing it doesn't mean they can't, but it does mean that it's a question and the combine and a pro day to an extent. But again, I think for teams to see the players over and over doing the same thing, it really, they have all that technology now, Cease, right? 2020, where they can overlay it, and you can really see the differences and really understand how springy, or how much juice there is in a cut in a route, and see how that is going to translate. If you don't do it at the combine, then that hurts you. But Cease, there's an argument if you're his agent to just not do any of it. Because if you do any of it when you're not healthy you're more likely to hurt, stay as a mystery box, but some teams may not be satisfied with that. So when you said third round, Tease, I don't think that's outlandish at all if the combine doesn't go well for him.
Yeah, and he's got the mulligan as long as it doesn't make the injury worse, and that's the aggravation. Literally, the aggravation could be the aggravation. And we haven't even brought up Jefferson or Higgins or any of these guys, dude. I mean, and for me, because you mentioned change of direction, this is where 3-cone comes in. The combine, underwear Olympics. Yeah, let me watch the 3-cone. The 40's the 40, whatever. The 3-cone, let me see a guy change direction. Let me see his explosion. That's very interesting during the week of the combine.
It is. And by the way, on the wide receivers, they're adding the fade again, but they're taking away the toe tap drill. It makes me kind of sad because toe tap's one of those things. Like one of the things that I like to watch when we watch practices or see when we watch these drills is what a player does when they're not even thinking about it. It's just what's instinct, what's natural. And the toe trap, you can't fake the toe tap. I don't think a player who doesn't have a good toe tap can learn it. I think it's just a coordination kind of in real time, how you experience things in that matrix 3-dimensional. Yeah, absolutely. It's a reflex. But there's some reflexive things about tracking the ball with the fade. I'm just not impressed with the fade as a play call at the goal line. So you're going to be saying like, I don't know about that.
Well, I'll be quite honest. I didn't wear these colors for him either, Bloom. And I'll be honest, I didn't watch a lot of Rhode Island film. But if we just talk about like other guys, like my other guy is Aaron Parker because he was brilliant at the Shrine Bowl. And every single day of practice continued with the ascension, was a star from day one. And all 3 days I was down in Tampa. He was very, very fun to watch. Rhode Island kid, again, want to see how he stacks up compared to all of these top level prospects. Don't forget about a guy like that. Probably, optimistically, I'll say 4th round. But Parker got the attention of scouts, certainly from film and certainly at the Shrine Bowl earlier. You got anybody like that where you're just like, I just kind of like this guy?
Well, I think, I was looking this year. I want to bring up a running back more than a wide receiver if we're going back.
Do it to it, Laws.
Yeah, I think A.J. Dillon's really interesting because there's not another running back like him.
250 pounds.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, for some teams, again, their playbook and their running game might have more of a hot zone for that. But when you get to that weight, Cease, those thresholds become important. But it could also go from thresholds just being above the threshold to actually being a more attractive prospect if he's showing out some plus athleticism with that kind of mass, that kind of size. And you mentioned wide receivers and building momentum. And even though this is a top-heavy class, I think the combine is still a place for some of the secondary prospects to gain momentum and some of the prospects that they're going to be scrambling for. We saw it last year at the 2-3 turn, right? It was McCole Hardman, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin went a little bit after that. There was a rush of wide receivers that maybe, how many people had Hardman in the second round? How many people had Deontay Johnson going as high as he did? Right. How many people? And this is a time, I think, when receivers can make a move and maybe we don't see it. Maybe you're not going to see a consensus on a draft board from a draft analyst, like great one like Dane Brugler or someone like that. But for a team, these are going to be moments when a receiver like the Rhode Island receiver can move up on the draft board.
Yeah, move up, watch out for those small school guys. And is there any tight end that really trips your trigger? I'll get to Dalton Keenan a little bit, but he's like a late round guy and local prospect. But this is a year, based off of last year when we're like, oh my God, look at TJ Hawkinson and look at Noah Fant and like all of the tight end talk that we had last year. I wrote up tight ends today for the Fan on my combine preview, and I was like, yeah, there's nobody in the first round. Maybe a guy in the second round or two, maybe.
Right. It's a third round class.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of sizzle in this tight end class.
No, you're right. And in this, the calendar 4 years ago, the free agents right now are Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. I think they 1-2 in their class, if not close. And even now, even though they have fantasy relevance, you don't think of Hunter Henry or Austin Hooper among even the top 10 or 15 tight ends that tilt a game in any way. So I think that it's similar, although again, you're going to see these guys try to assert themselves to teams in terms of what their strengths are, right? Like Adam Troutman is going to be your receiver. Maybe some of the strengths are going to be the ability to develop into athleticism, Hunter Bryant or Harrison Bryant. You are going to see a class of tight ends where, like Cecil, these teams are taking tight ends in the third and fourth round, but some of the wide receivers on the board, because we're looking at it from a fantasy lens, you're going to say, these receivers are much better football players, but we also see how much teams value tight end and overpay guys like Jesse James and Tyler Croft and overdraft players. If you just go back and look at some of the tight ends that have been drafted in the third and fourth round lately, it'll surprise Nick Vanette, Right. So certainly that's where the hot zone of this group is, which isn't exciting for us, but teams like using the tight ends a lot, and they're going to be watching them closely.
They are going to be watching them closely. I'll be watching closely. For Dalton Keene, I make no bones about it. He played high school football with my son. They were freshman quarterbacks together. And the first time I saw Dalton play, I was like, that's different. Like he immediately stood out. And you don't regularly see that. And I'm not one of those people that like calls it or whatever. Like, I saw him in high school. But it was just, he was so different. His dad played in the NFL. And he goes to Virginia Tech because of his dad played under Frank Beamer at Murray State. So he wanted to go to Va Tech. Switches to tight end. He actually, Liam continued as a quarterback. Dalton got switched to running back, and they made him the centerpiece of their offense. But Dalton can still throw. Like, I've seen that kid throw enough to know, like, if there's a Taysom Hill, John Lovett, and I'm going to ask Dalton, I'm going to write about it next week, but I'm spoiling it for everybody here because I'm going to ask him, like, would you want to throw the ball? Would you? Because he's a gadget guy. Scored 3 touchdowns against the Hurricanes in a game last year, and was always a consistent receiver from day one when he showed up there in Blacksburg. So of course, former Chatfield Chargers, baby. Don't get to say that much on the show anymore.
No.
But yeah, I'll be watching my man Dalton Keene from right down the road. I drive past his parents' house every day.
Cease. I've got one for you. You said dad played in the NFL.
Okay.
Thaddeus Moss.
There you go. There you go.
And this is a player. And see, here's another aspect of the combine we haven't talked about yet. The seniors teams have been putting together their dossiers on all along, and even some of these underclassmen, they knew they were coming out this year. Thaddeus Moss. Do you think that it was just on foregone conclusion that he was going to be in this draft class like 2 months ago?
Right.
So this is an interesting guy that, of course, Randy Moss's son. That should pique your attention, right? So there's a tight end that has some money to make during the combine.
During the scouting combine, you at home actually get to see more. So for everyone like, man, I wish I was going to Indy.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I got an apartment in Indy Bloom. I'm like super excited about that. It's not Airbnb either. It's something called State Alfred. And I got it through Expedia, where I always book all my trips. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want an apartment. So I could stay in my apartment and watch the drills and see more than I will in person. Now, in person, I'll be able to go talk to the prospects. And I got a private interview with John Elway and Vic Fangio and my Broncos dinner to go to on Monday, all that kind of stuff. But this is a made-for-TV event now. Look at where we've come. And I like Bloom. It sounds funny, but I guess I'll tell the truth. I already went there, but I was thinking about this show when I was in the shower today.
Okay.
Getting ready for Broncos TV. And I was like, I like when Sig says we've been on for 3 decades, because we have. And in these 3 decades, isn't it cool to see how the combine is now like it's a TV event? It's awesome.
Yeah, it's on the football calendar in a big way for a lot of reasons. In a way that, see, when we were kids, we'll walk down memory lane arm in arm together. In the 80s, how many people really even watched the draft? As kid football fans growing up and knowing about Walter Abercrombie or Tim Worley or whoever the Steelers were taking going into the draft, understanding who, wanting to know as much as you could know. But it was barely registered a blip, I think, on the larger football radar. And then the draft as an event started to, I think at the time we started doing this, the combine was still like that. Certainly the All-Star games were like that. where only people that were truly way too obsessed with football were being aware in real time or saying like, oh, combine's coming up this week. And now it's part of the wheel that, that turns the crank that makes the season go, and then sees in the background. Because I think what's really exciting about this, we've been on for 3 decades. We've seen things change, not just about how the game is perceived or covered, but the game itself, and then how evaluating players and that whole process changes too. And we have in the CBA, and I don't know if we should give a little assist to the XFL or not, but maybe, because it's just timing, right? The way the XFL comes, and you know how the NFL is, Cease. They want to know, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Float things out. Oh,
Right.
do you like it? If you don't like it, we don't have to do it. Do you like it?
Right.
I mean, that's why the NFL is honestly well out of sync with its fan base, even though because of the players and the coaches and the dedication of the people around the game, there's a product that is just undeniably fascinating and compelling. But the NFL, not saying their changes are good or bad changes, but there are changes. The 17 games or the playoff format or whatever. So everything's continuing to change. And in a lot of ways, I think it's more democratic than we realize, because the NFL is paying attention. I think they are paying attention to the reception of the XFL. I think they were paying attention, Cease, when we were saying there's something to be marketed in the draft season, that football fans want to be informed, want to take the ride in the draft season. I can remember it was about 10 years ago when Greg Rosenthal started up around the NFL blog, but otherwise the NFL.com site didn't really have content. Now they understand there's so much content. The combine is incredible content. And what's great is, even if you're at work or Mardi Gras like me, you're going to miss stuff. We can go back for the next month and a half, and will continue to inform us. So it's good stuff, man. The football calendar just giveth and giveth and giveth.
Yeah, I remember when NFL.com wasn't the place to go for anything.
Yeah,
like anything.
It was just a placeholder for the NFL, basically,
right.
Maybe for scores or something. That's it.
Right. And again, great quality work from Lance Zierlein. His player profiles are
Yes.
starting to get out there, of course, for the combine. So check out his work, and check us out on footballguys.com and our 6-section videos. Bloom, you like doing those?
Yeah, a little more professional, a little more button up in my delivery, because I like to be jocular and engage. But I just like it because, I mean, Steve, it's the worst thing. I always say one of my favorite moments is someone says, will you tell me your opinion about whatever? Oh, that's like,
Why, thank you.
I would love to. What do you have for me to be a critic or evaluate or otherwise opine on? And the folks, including yourself, but especially our audience, have been so indulgent and kind. And I think that I wish I want to do an Alshon Jeffrey video, because now this comes out that I want to trade Alshon Jeffrey. And remember whenever Howie Roseman guaranteed his 2020 $12.75 million? You did this to yourself, Eagles. He's not going to want to play anywhere, so that means he's going to go to the Jets. No one's going to want him, and certainly not want to pay him that. So the point is, there's stuff that catches our eye every day in the off season, and it gives me a chance to share what's on my mind. So people are very gracious about that. But I think you can feel it after the combine, not just the draft, not just free agency, franchise tags, 5th-year options. I mean, we're going to have too much to talk about, and the season's 6 months away.
Yeah, here we go. Never an off season for talking fantasy football. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Audible from footballguys.com. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing. By the way, Bloom, because you brought up conspiracy theory earlier, I was watching our man Lucifer Means Lightbringer. I was watching his channel yesterday, and he had some great theories about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Just off the charts production, off the chart. And one of our guys that usually shows up, I didn't see him yet today, but yeah, if you love Game of Thrones, Lucifer Means Lightbringer, watch his channel, because it was fan flipping tastic. Just like the fan flipping tastic Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying follow us on Twitter. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for listening on iTunes and Spotify and all that. As always, stay tuned and stay frosty. See, that was like